Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me in Ravenna. I'd like to talk for a little bit about how we got into our mess in the United States, in Italy, in the Eurozone, and how we might get out of it. Ultimately, I am an optimist, a cautious optimist. But there's a very important difference. I am an optimist about Europe, but I am not an optimist about the euro. And so often in discourse today in Europe, if you are a pessimist about the euro, they think you are a pessimist. This is completely wrong. This is a distinction of central importance. One can be optimistic without being optimistic about the euro. This is my book in English. It is called The Great Stagnation. In Italian, it's something like La Grande Stagnazione, a very similar idea. And the key point here is to explain how the world got into its current mess. So let's go back in history a little. This is 1989, 1990. The Berlin Wall comes down. Communism collapses. Many good things happen. If you think about the 1980s, the 1990s, you have at least 25 solid years of very good events. China reforms, the Soviet Union falls, the United States starts growing again, stagflation ends. Many things globally look very good. So the world gets very optimistic. There are many very good political events. But I stress that word political. So on TV, you see this. However, in the numbers, we see this. I'll explain this more in a moment, but this is what I call La Grande Stagnazione in the United States. This is a graph, and it shows productivity. It shows how much of American productivity is coming from new ideas. And as you can see in this graph, at about 1973, it gets worse. Around 1973, America became less innovative. To be sure, very often our incomes went up. In particular, women worked longer hours, women became better educated, women took on bigger and better jobs, and that's great news. If people want to work, they should have that opportunity to work. But it's a very different source of economic growth than new ideas. So let me just put this in perspective with some numbers. For the United States, probably the most innovative time in our history was the 1920s or even the 1930s. We had a lot of new ideas. So in a typical year in the 20s or 30s, the United States might get 3 percentage points of growth a year from new ideas. The radio, the automobile, electricity, flush toilets, basic medicine, clean water. Within a span of 20, 30 years, people's lives changed completely. 3% a year. From Thomas Edison, from the telephone, it would fall into your lap. If you look at today, or many of the other years after 1973, and ask, how much growth does the United States get a year from new ideas? It's about 1/2 of a percentage point. So in percentage terms, in the 1920s, we were about 6 times more innovative than we were today. That's a big difference. It's a shocking difference. It punctures this myth that we have about ourselves as Americans. We are so great. We are so innovative. We are so good at business. We are phenomenal. This is today not completely true. It is a kind of complacency, a kind of arrogance, because this cutting edge, new ideas, America has lost a lot of it. When you go through and you look at different sectors, this is the dynamic sector. You all know what this is? I see a lot of these in Italy. One reason why I'm optimistic for both of our countries. China too. So this sector, this is fantastic. We all know this. But most other sectors have really been quite slow. So take the life of my dear old grandmother. My grandmother was born in the year 1905. By the time she was 50 years old, every single part of her life had changed. Everything. Electricity, toilet, car, radio, television, airplanes, completely different. This year, me, poor little old me, I turned 50. The first 50 years of my life, what has changed? When I was born, they had cars. I have a car. Does my car fly? No. When I was born, they had TV. I have more channels. When I was born, they had records. I have compact disc. I have iPod. It's better, sort of. It's not that different. Again, except for iPad, internet, things are better, but there have not been major breakthroughs. And that, again, is this idea of the great stagnation. And here, these are productivity numbers. It's a slowdown. Now, this is the data for the United States, but if you're wondering, for the rest of the Western world, it is roughly the same story. In some ways, it's easier to see in the United States than in Italy. Because in Italy, different parts of Italy modernize at different times. So parts of Italy are always playing catch-up. Whereas the United States was in many ways the first country to become technologically modern. So the slowdown in the United States is more drastic in some ways, more drastic in the numbers. This is what happened a few years ago, the bankruptcy at Lehman Brothers, the financial crisis. Let me give you my theory of the financial crisis in a few simple sentences. There are all kinds of complicated stories about the financial crisis. The derivatives, the subprime mortgages, the banks, that's all true. But think of it in very simple terms. We Americans acted like a country that was still growing at 3% a year. In reality, we were a country that was actually growing maybe 1 percentage point a year. The expectation, 3. The reality, 1. The result. Put all the detail on top of that story, but that story is the bottom line. It's not about any single villain. It's not even especially about the banks. Of course, it hits the banks because the banks are highly leveraged. We plan for 3%, we get 1%. That's our story. It looked like this. Our story is not over. We're taking a pause, a breather, time out. I'll get back to America. Don't think we're in the clear. Here's another story. This is Greece. Many of you have been there, I think. You see it on TV. When you cut through all the detail, it's in some ways the same story as the American story, but more exaggerated, a bigger problem. When Greece joins the Eurozone, there is an expectation that now Greece is a mature nation, that Greece is as creditworthy as Germany almost, that Greece will keep on growing, that Greece will be a stable democracy, that Greece is a mature business nation, and everyone makes plans on this basis. But those plans turn out to be wrong. Doing business in Greece is still very, very difficult. Greece is not nearly as wealthy as Germany. not nearly as creditworthy as Italy, and so on and so on. So there's the expectations, very high, the reality, pretty low. You come to Greece, right? Same basic story. Expectations and reality collide. So what's going to happen? Maybe they'll have more of this, but my prediction, I've been predicting this for some time, is that within the next year, Greece will leave the Eurozone. Now, I understand that with Greek voters, if you ask them in a poll, do you like the euro? Mostly they say yes, because the Greeks understand their own government and how corrupt it is, and they see the euro and the Eurozone as a kind of tie or a connection to some chance of a better life. So my prediction is not that the Greek government will get on TV a month from now and announce we are leaving the euro. My prediction is that the euro will leave Greece before Greece leaves the euro. Right now, there does not appear to be stable government in Greece. The extreme left-wing parties, the extreme right-wing party, essentially have a majority. Right now, it looks that they will have new elections in another few weeks. It's like what the Irish used to do. Keep on voting until you get it right. But with people as unhappy as they are in Greece, I think there is no consensus in any particular direction. There's simply unhappiness with how things are. So let me take all the people in this room and ask you a simple question. You all have some amount of money. How many of you right now are taking that money and investing it in Greek banks? Show of hands. How many of you are investing in Greek banks? No hands go up. Why not? I think it's obvious why not. The thing is, people in Greece are asking themselves this same question. And the longer the Greek mess goes on, the more there will be capital flight, and the euro will leave Greece. No decision is required. Germany doesn't kick them out. They don't announce they're leaving. It will happen on no single day. But what will happen is so many euros will leave Greece, there will be such a credit contraction that one day, to pay the pensioners, to pay the state employees, the Greek government will not have enough euros, and they will issue paper claims, debt claims, IOUs, scrip, whatever you want to call it. And the paper will say, good for 300 euros in 1 month. And they will send their postal workers the paper, good for 300 euros in 1 month. The postal workers are not stupid. They know the euros are not there. They know they have some other piece of paper. Within about a week, maybe a day, maybe an hour, people will start to call these pieces of paper the drachma. And that is how Greece will leave the Eurozone. They will issue paper claims to state employees. Very quickly, people will realize the euros are not there to back those claims, and voila, you will have the drachma. Greece will have two currencies. Most of the euros will be gone. Over time, they will re-evolve to a drachma economy. In my opinion, Portugal also cannot last in the Eurozone. Once Greece goes under, Portugal is next. Portugal is stronger than Greece, but the economy is very weak. The borrowing rate is high. The productivity problem is high. Let's ask the same question. How many of you have money invested in Portuguese banks right now? Show of hands. Your bank account in Lisbon? Show of hands, please. Okay, it's what I thought. People in Portugal are starting to ask themselves the same question. So what is going to happen, I predict within a year, is Greece will leave, people will ask very serious questions about Portugal, there will be capital flight from Portugal, and Portugal will leave too. Again, not through an announcement, not through a decision, it simply will happen. Spain, what about Spain? One of my favorite countries. I think in Spain it is quite unclear. Economically, Spain is much stronger than either Greece or Portugal. The problems in Spain are political economy problems. Unemployment, of course, is high. Youth unemployment is high. They have problems with the banks, and they have problems with provincial finance. Spain, I think, has a chance of making it. We do not know. But when Greece and Portugal are tested and fail, there will be immediate pressure on Spain. But this one, I think, Spain is very hard to predict. It could go either way. Dare I ask about Italy? I am too polite to ask the question, how many of you have money invested in Italian banks? Because I think most of you do. You don't have to show me. This is Italy. Keep it a secret. Another question. Please don't raise your hand, no matter what the answer is. How many of you have money invested in banks outside of Italy? How many people in Milan, in Bergamo, in Como, in Torino, in Verona, Padua? We could go on and on. How many of those people have money in the bank in Switzerland? We don't exactly know, but I think a few of them do. But here's the good news. Italy has a stronger economy than Spain. If you think of productivity in Italy, there are so many areas where Italian productivity is strong. Before this talk, my wife and I, we went to see the famous churches of Ravenna. Fantastic, beautiful. Some of the most beautiful art, I think, in the entire world. Not just in Italy, but in the entire world. Here's the stunning thing. If you look at tile work as an economic sector, beautiful tiles, Italy is still world leader. They face more competition than they used to. If you look at fashion, if you look at wines, if you look at many food products, you can find many areas where Italy is a world leader. You have small to mid-sized firms, often family firms, and they have a complete dedication to quality, and they are successful in finding outside markets. This is much stronger in Italy than in Spain. So Italy has quite a good chance of making it through. But there are some problems with Italy. Let me show you those problems. Here's one. It's called Italy GDP growth. GDP in English, that just means national income. That's how well the economy is doing. Which way is this line going? It's kind of going the wrong way. This is a problem. This is for Italy, la grande stagnazione. It's a problem. Here's another way to look at it. Here is real GDP, or real income per capita, per person. How much money is earned? Today, this is not up to date, but it's no higher than it was 12 years ago. So in net terms, Italy has gone 12 years without really growing. It went up, it went down. It's kind of where it was 12 years ago. This too is worrying. So the market, when financial markets look at Italy, they do see the numerous important strengths, but they see a long-run problem. And the long-run problem is this, and the long-run problem is that. So right now, Italy is solvent. But 20 years from now, if this continues, and if that continues, people wonder, how will Italy pay its bills? But here's a difference between Italy and the other Mediterranean countries. In my opinion, Italy's problems are very much solvable. That does not mean they will be solved. But I think in a strange way, Italy and the United States have a similar set of problems. Those problems have a similar nature. In both of our countries, it is possible to solve them. The question is, do we have the will, the desire to solve them? So far in my country, I don't see it. Italy, I'm not sure. But let me tell you three ways Italy could solve most of its fiscal problems. You don't need all three of these. Any one of them would do, or in some combination. Here's the first way. Have more babies. Babies are producers in time. Babies are taxpayers. Babies support parents when they get older. Right now in Italy, the Italian population is shrinking, and we understand some economic and social reasons why. But all Italy would have to do is start having more babies, and the fiscal problem would go away. Now, I know that's not easy, and none of you right here are solving this problem right now. You're listening to me. Go solve the problem. But that's one way. It's not impossible. The technology has been invented. It can be taught. There's a second way, if you don't like the first way. The second way is to let in more immigrants. I know this is a controversial idea in virtually every country. But when I say more immigrants, this does not have to mean more drug gangs from Tunisia. It can mean letting in more Asians. It can mean letting in more Latinos. It can mean requiring high skills from immigrants, if need be. There are many good ways of using immigration to solve this problem. If it's too painful and too boring to produce young people, invite some in that have been produced by someone else. They will come. So right now, immigration to Italy, it has slowed down with hard times. So it needs to be made easier. And there are so many reasons why people don't want immigrants to come, but most of those reasons, I think, are incorrect. If you look at the United States, we have one city, it's called El Paso. It's in Texas. El Paso, the city, it is more than 70% Latino, mostly Mexican. If you look at statistics on crime, and you ask of the major cities in the United States, which one has the lowest level of crime? Americans are shocked to hear it, but it is El Paso. The 70% Mexican El Paso has the lowest crime rate of major cities in the United States. So there are ways immigration can be done. That's the second solution. Let me tell you a third solution. Some of you perhaps have heard this number for Italy, for America, Greece. It's called the debt to GDP ratio. And that number compares how high is the debt compared to how much the country produces in a given year. And right now for Italy, this number is over 100%. Italy has a fairly high debt to GDP ratio. And this sounds very scary. More debt than what you produce in a year. But there's another way to frame the comparison. You can compare the debt of Italy to Italy's national wealth. And if you calculate the national wealth of Italy, all of the land, all of the homes, all of the human capital, all of the artistic treasures, all of the factories, everything, that total wealth of Italy is much, much higher than national income in any one year. So the ratio of your debt to wealth, this is a guess. I tried working this out with pen and paper. Maybe it's 5%. Your wealth is like this, and your debt is like this. Maybe it's 5%. Let's say I had $1 million or euros in the bank, Swiss bank, just to be sure, and I had a mortgage of $50,000 and $1 million in the bank. Who would be worried about me? No one. If you have $1 million in the bank and a mortgage of $50,000 or $100,000, no one would be worried about you. So we do not have to be worried about Italy. But here's the thing. When wealth is high and you have some debt, at some point, somehow, you have to convert the wealth to paying off the debt. And if everyone says, you can't do it this way, you can't do it that way, you can't do it this way, you can't do it that way, if you freeze up and have gridlock and no progress, then you cannot solve the problem. But again, to view it in very simple abstract terms, the total debt of Italy relative to Italian wealth, talent, land, homes, treasures, resources is not that large. Italy simply needs the will to solve the problem. Babies, immigrants, think about your wealth. Italy has at least 3 ways out. None of them are huge mysteries. None of them require genius. Same with America. But the thing is, my country, your country, it's not clear we're going to do it. It's not clear we're going to take any of those paths and actually see them through and solve our problems. So my trip, so many people have asked me, are you optimistic about Italy? I say yes and no. I think the current situation is in some ways better than people think, but in other ways it is worse. Because the will to solve the problem, it's not obvious it is there. I see a tendency among Italian elites to look to Europe, to look to Germany. The Germans will impose sound money on us. Maastricht will impose fiscal discipline on us. Always from the outside, someone will impose the answer on us. And I have never thought that will work. I have a suggestion I would like to make, and I know some of you will find this absurd, truly absurd, but I would like to make it anyway, maybe shock you a bit. I think the most likely path for Italy to do well is bottom up. It will not come from Monti or some other technocratic government. It will not come from Brussels. It will not come from Berlin. Those connections in some ways are broken. They're not working. But the idea that at the local level, at the city level, people will simply demand better and get it. So if I look at my perch back home in North America, I live outside of Washington, D.C. If I look at Mexico, Mexico is a country with a lot of problems. It's much poorer than Italy. It has big drug gang wars. It has many different languages. Mexico has serious problems. But local government in Mexico, in at least half the country, has become much better in the last 15 years. The national government is less corrupt. Local government is much better. Town government is often much better. And what happened was simply that Mexicans demanded more and demanded better. Not in every part of Mexico, but in many parts of the country, they got it. In Brazil, in Peru. So I know there is an Italian tendency to think of local politics, corruption, patronage, cronyism, best friends, back-scratching, as a kind of hopeless problem. But it does not have to be a hopeless problem. Many countries in recent history with less wealth and less talent than Italy have made big advances on this problem. So the optimistic scenario for Italy, for me, is a kind of reform from inside, starting local, bottom up. As an outsider, if I look at Monti, I see a man who talks a good game, but essentially he is doing nothing. I do not blame him. It's not clear he has the powers to do enough. He was not really elected. He does not have a mandate. He does not have a long term. But nonetheless, the fact that he talks so clearly, like such a smart technocrat, it's not actually worth that much. Maybe we can feel good about it, that's great, but it won't solve the basic problems. What else do we have? Here's the short run in Italy. This graph is more technical. This is a measure of credit collapse, is the way I read this graph. It's something called M3. Remember that question, do you have your money in a Greek bank, a Portuguese bank, an Italian bank? Well, the ability to process credit in Italy, as you can see, it's in some trouble. So there's a kind of race against the clock here. No one knows exactly how much time Italy has, but in the short run, there are serious pressures. And basically what will happen is Greece will leave the euro, Portugal too, and the market will wake up the next morning and look very, very hard at Italy. And what will happen? This, to me, is the big question. I think no one knows. The current situation is really without precedent in the history of the world. Will this line keep going down and euros will leave Italy? I tend to think not, but I would stress the point, no one knows. It will be a chaotic time. There will be some market panic. Greece and Portugal will fall, Spain maybe, Italy is sounder, but it still will come under question. Even France, somewhat, will come under question. And it doesn't matter who the French elected, Hollande or Sarkozy, it doesn't matter, it's all the same. The real constraints are longer term. What can a country produce? How many children does it have? How productive are they? Not which French leaders picked. Forget about that. It's irrelevant. So life will get interesting here very soon. I'm cautiously optimistic. In the longer run, I'm optimistic. Here's a way to think about it. If I ask myself, what is mankind's greatest achievement of all time? It's an interesting question. And my answer is this. Mankind's greatest achievement of all time is Europe, especially Western Europe. It's where we are now, right? So right now, we are living in mankind's greatest achievement ever, both historically and the current day. Italian lives are very good. French lives, German lives, today, very good. How much of that mankind's greatest achievement has depended upon the Eurozone? This much. Less, this much. I can't even make the space so small to show you. Not very much. So I'm a pessimist about the euro, but not pessimistic about Europe. The great achievements never relied on having a common currency. The common currency may go away. The short run may or may not be very bad. But the important features of the problem, human talent, competitiveness, productivity, creativity, ingenuity, those are mostly not going away from Italy and not from a lot of other countries too. So there, I'm cautiously optimistic. Just to sum up, here's another way that I think about the euro versus Europe. Look at this stuff. Have any of you ever seen this stuff? Whose face is on these bills? You don't see anyone, right? Were they going to put a German on? Well, who would it be? Maybe Goethe, maybe he's safe, maybe Bach, I don't know. But if they put on a German, well, you have to put on a Frenchman. Who will that be? Someone pretty neutral. Then you put an Italian on another bill. You've got 17 nations, Some of them, their feelings are hurt. Who do you pick from Slovakia? Which bill are they on? That arch, where is that arch? It's not anywhere. It's an imaginary arch. That's the problem. No faces on this currency because in essence they couldn't agree. If they can't agree whose face to put on the bill, how are they going to agree on a workable plan where someone has to pay for it all? I say they probably can't. Think about US, my country. We can't get one government to agree on anything. And here you're going to get 17 nations to agree on a workable bailout plan where some take and others pay. My guess is it can't happen. Look at this money. Any of you ever seen this stuff? Giacometti, Honecker, Arp. They used to have Euler on the Swiss notes. That was my favorite. No one in Switzerland is upset at having Swiss faces on the notes. They change them over time, different parts of Switzerland. Switzerland's a coherent unit. They have a strong, coherent money. The problem they have in Switzerland is that the money is too strong on international markets. And it's that strong basically because they have faces on it. Look at these strong faces, beautiful faces, part of mankind's greatest achievement faces. Celebrating mankind's greatest achievement. You look back at this stuff, no imagination. These notes are running away from mankind's greatest achievement. That is why I think that this probably cannot work, but that about Europe, we can nonetheless be more optimistic. Anyway, thank you all for coming and listening.
Bravo.